All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's HLAA webinar, Elections 2024, Accessibility and Voting with panelists Neil Schneider and Brian Meyer from our office. Thank you for joining today. My name is Melissa Cruz, and I'll be your host. I'm going to start off by giving you some tech tips. To see captions on this webinar, you need to click on the CC icon and click on Show Subtitles. The chat feature we're going to use for tech panels to connect. If you want to ask questions, please use the Q&A icon. We'll be using this to facilitate questions both during the presentation and after Neil and Brian finish speaking. They'll be taking Q&A. You should be, if you've joined us by computer, in side-by-side mode. There'll be a shared screen with the presentation on the left, and the speakers will appear on the right in gallery view. You can adjust the size of your side-by-side view by holding your pointer between the shared screen and the panelist video and clicking on the gray line to adjust to your desired view. If you join by mobile device or phone, your view may be slightly different, and you may have to scroll between views to get to the desired one. Just a quick disclaimer that HLA does not endorse any products featured in this webinar, which I don't think we're going to be talking about any products, but we're just going to be talking, it's going to be an educational opportunity to learn about new things. And as I mentioned today, our presenters are Neil Schneider and Brian Meyer, and now I'm going to turn the presentation over to them.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody's doing all right today. This is a webinar on accessibility and voting. Oh, come on, I'm not advancing. I need to be in presentation mode.
Yes, you should
Yes.
be in Neil, you're muted.
There we go. Too many buttons to click. I'm Neil Schneider, HLA's Director of Public Policy. With me presenting today is Brian Meyer, HLA's Public Policy Associate, and you've already met Melissa Cruz. We're joined by a couple other HLA staff in the background. Robin and Tim are out there, so thank you for coming and helping. Why is it not advancing?
You're in slideshow mode.
You want to go from current slide?
There we go.
There you go.
And just to demonstrate what a election nerd I am, I'm also an election chief here in the city of Alexandria in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And every time you volunteer for an election, you get a pin. And these are some of the ones I found. I have more somewhere, but these are just some of the ones I get. I know that Brian has done something similar in the state of Maryland. And if you have interest, they always need more people to help run our elections. I wanted to stress how important elections are by telling you guys about some of the closest elections in U.S. history. Back in 2006 in Connecticut, Joe Courtney beat Rod Simmons by less than 100 votes. In 1986 in Greensboro, North Carolina, Howard Coble beat the sitting Robin Britt by 79 votes. However, Coble went on to hold that seat for the next 29 years. Your vote's important. Similarly, in Indiana, In 1984, Frank McCluskey defeated Rick McIntyre by 4 votes. And in the closest Senate election in U.S. history in New Hampshire in 1974, with over 200,000 votes cast, Louis Wyman defeated John Dunn by about 10 votes. And of course, everybody knows back in 2000 when Al Gore got 50,999,000 votes and George Bush got 50,456,000 votes. So over 101 million votes cast, but there was only a difference between of them between 543,000 or 0.53% difference. So yes, every vote does count. However, if you have a disability, often voting is difficult. A survey showed that people with vision impairments reported the highest difficulty with voting in person or by mail. Next, cognitive impairments was the most likely to report difficulties. And while mobility and hearing impairments reported lower rates, they still remain a significantly higher than other voters with disabilities. And that kind of yields what they call a turnout gap between people who vote with and without disabilities. And in 2000, the gap between those two groups was 16.8%. And that gap has shrunk over the past 20 years, but it continues to persist. And here's a chart representing that. So for those of you, the blue column are voter turnout with no disability, and the red column is voters with disabilities, and the green is the difference between those two columns. And you can see in 2000, it was 16.8%. It had shrunk to 10% in 2012, but it has grown back to 11.3%. So with all these changes and innovations in voting, there's still a barrier to voting for some. The most important thing to know and to be is to be registered to vote. So elections are operated by each of our 50 states in 50 different ways. And their registration deadlines are different, but generally they vary from 0 days, so you can register to vote on the election day, to being required to register at least 30 days before the election. The link we have there is a way that you can check to see where the election deadlines are in your state, the registration deadlines are in your state. And for instance, Arkansas and Georgia, their registration deadlines are coming up in 2 or 3 weeks here, and that's the earliest. And as I said, other states you can do same-day voting. Since the last presidential election, there's been a lot of changes to how we vote, and some may view these as good or bad things, but generally, some states have put new restrictions on voting into place. They've banned non-photo IDs, limited or banned ballot drop boxes. They limit early voting, shortened the deadline to apply for absentee ballots, shortened the time to mail in that absentee ballot. Some states prohibit the action of ballot harvesting. That's where an individual or group goes around and collects absentee ballots and then brings them in as a group. Limits on voter registration organizations. Some of these registration organizations do these ballot harvestings, and others have put more restrictions or on proving your identity when it comes to requesting an absentee ballot. And here are the states that have put in some of the most new restrictive ballot laws: Ohio, Mississippi, Idaho, Florida, Indiana, and Arkansas and South Dakota. Conversely, some states have gone the other way and have expanded voting. Some states have automatic voter registration. So when you go to the DMV and you apply for a license or something, some states automatically register you. Some do it with younger people too. You can pre-register in some states if you're a teen, so that if you do become eligible during an election cycle, you're automatically enrolled. Some states have expanded early voting. Some states have given the voters to track their absentee ballot. Similarly, they've given voters the ability to fix mistakes on absentee ballot. Another state required language assistance for voters because it was determined that there was discrimination in that state. And another state has allowed no excuse absentee voting. And what that means is back in the past, for instance, Virginia, if you wanted to vote absentee, you had to declare a reason. You were traveling, you were in court, you had surgery. Many states have gotten rid of those reasons. You just need to request a ballot and they will send you one. And so these are the states that have done expansions. New Mexico, that's the automatic registering, Minnesota, Michigan, and Connecticut. And then there are voting options out there. And the three basic ways are you can vote by mail, you can vote in person, vote early in person, and vote on election day. One of the things you should pay attention to when you vote by mail is, again, the rules and regulations in your state. Some require you to request an application. Some require you to mail it in between a certain period of time. So it has to be postmarked or received by a different specific date. And where you drop it off. Do you drop it off at a ballot drop box or at the Board of Elections? Those states that allow early voting it may not be in your precinct. It could be at a central location like a city hall, main library, or the registrar's office, Board of Elections, or as we said, at your drop box in your city. Again, election day in-person voting, make sure you know the location, the hours of that voting place. It may have changed since the last time you voted. Here in Alexandria, we often have voting in school gyms, but Alexandria is going through a school construction program, so they're tearing down schools and reopening new ones. So your location may have been moved temporarily or moved permanently, maybe due to construction, or this is a general election coming up, so they needed a bigger space than the last time you voted in, so they moved from the multi-purpose room to the gymnasium, so pay attention to that. And also pay attention to the hours of the election. They're pretty strict about that. In Virginia, I know that at the end of the day, when the polls close at 7, if you're in line at 7, you get to vote on the machine, even if that takes another hour. You just can't show up at 7:10 and join the back of the line. Again, your location may have changed. That's a frequent thing we experience here in Virginia. And be cognizant of when you're voting. If you're showing up at 6 or 7 a.m. when they're voting, there's that opening rush, so there could be long lines, the lunch rush we experience, and then from 3 or 4 o'clock on until closing, you get people picking their kids up from school, getting off of work, or trying to squeeze it in after work. So voting in between those periods of the day may be advantageous. Voting accessibility. So again, long lines in the morning. This is a general election. If your state has a presidential election, if your state has gubernatorial, Senate, House, local elections, that could drive up turnout and lines. It could also be generate longer ballots, so people take longer to vote. So the churn through the election site may be slower. The election staff training and the quantity of election staff in a room may impact voting. So that all depends on your locality and your state and how well trained the election staff are and how many of them there are to deal with invalid IDs or expired registrations or things like that. And don't forget that there's multiple ways to vote on the same day. I know in Virginia, you can request curbside voting. We're required to post a phone number outside. So if you have a physical disability, you can call and then we'll come out to your car with a ballot, verify your ID, and then you can vote. And we'll even bring out the I voted sticker to you at the end. We also have accessible voting machines that have multi-tactile functions. So if you have other disabilities, you can vote on that machine. And just a reminder, all Americans have the right to vote, have the right to vote in person, with accessible equipment or the necessary modifications. So it could be a wheelchair table or a tall table. You can request assistance to vote, whether that's from the staff on site or from a person familiar to you. And conversely, you have the right to vote privately and independently without having somebody influence your vote. On site, what do you do if you have a problem? I would suggest you would speak to the precinct chief or judge. They're called different things in different localities. They're called judges in Maryland. They're called chiefs in Virginia. I'm a chief. We get extra special training and dealing with voters that are having issues, whether they're not appearing in the poll book, or they're in the wrong place, or they want to vote, they're new voters. If you're not satisfied with that, sometimes the party officials are on site being observers. There'll probably be many more observers this presidential election. You can speak to one of those party officials of your choice to see if they can help solve the problem. If you feel there's some sort of discrimination or malfeasance going on. You could also call the Board of Election or Registrar's Office to get any kind of clarification on rules and regulations to make sure that your local precinct is executing the election in the right way. And as a last choice, if you still haven't are not able to vote on a machine, you always have the right to vote provisionally, which is a vote. I know in Virginia, the votes are counted at the end of the election if the votes are needed to determine the outcome of the election. If candidate A gets thousands of votes more than candidate B, and there's a handful of provisional votes, they may not count, but they will open them, examine them, see if they qualify under Virginia rules and regulations, and then record them accordingly. Did we skip a couple pages there, Brian? Did we see the?
No, I don't think that they're there. We can talk.
Okay.
I can talk in just a minute if you want to just
Sure.
finish up. Yeah.
I don't know why they're not appearing. Just want to remind people that the first, actually the second presidential debate, but the first one with Kamala Harris and Donald Trump is tonight on ABC, though it is simulcast on other networks. And that the first and only scheduled vice presidential debate is on Tuesday, October 1st on CBS, but I could not find a time. For those of you who will be getting this presentation later, these are the some resources that were quoted in the presentation. And lastly, before I turn it over to Brian, I just wanted to remind people that today is Tuesday, so Election Day is 8 weeks away. That's 56 days or 1,344 hours away. And also today is the primary in New Hampshire, Delaware, and Rhode Island. So it's with the debates tonight and the primaries in those states, things are starting to happen. So get registered and get out there and vote. Brian?
Thank you, Neil. I apologize to everyone. I guess I had a few slides that really talked about how the election judges and the election officials at your precinct are trained ahead of time. Both Neil and I have served in that capacity, and I guess it goes without saying that the overarching guideline is that every person that shows up, we would make every attempt for them to cast their ballot, either through the ballot itself and the machine, or as Neil mentioned, sort of through what they call the provisional process. But more specifically to the area of accessibility, I did have a slide, and we'll try to find some of that information that the Maryland Disability Law Center has put together for election judges in that state. And it deals with how do you approach and assist someone who has any type of disability? And they specifically talk about voters who are deaf or hard of hearing. And basically, it's a lot of the techniques, if you will, that we use in other environments and other venues. And that really almost common sense to for the layperson, if you will, and that is use pen and paper or a whiteboard to communicate if necessary, or try to at least face the voter and speak slowly as you're there you go. Thank you, Neil. You found, I don't know if folks can really see all of that, and that's okay. But the whole point is this is to have the right amount of training for those election judges. And again, speak one should speak directly, face to face, speak slowly, if you will, speak articulately with a lot of clarity. And then I would also say, because many of us use speech to text applications on our smartphone, you certainly can bring those in. Don't be concerned about quote, the use of cell phones. You're allowed to do that and use that because that is a communication aid that you're entitled to use in order to help you get registered and or get your ballot at the first table that you usually go to. And then obviously once you complete the ballot again. The other one other thing is that any of you who have service animals, obviously you're allowed to bring those into the polling place as well. So again, it's educating the election judges, but also you folks and others who need to know what you're allowed to do and what you should do, and you should be assertive, if you will, in terms of what you are should ask for, so that you have the proper accommodations in order to cast your ballot. Just one kind of reminder, and that is that when you talk about the mail ballot or the early, voting by mail, be mindful that sometimes on those forms, you need to have your signature there. So you have to pay sort of extra attention to those instructions, more so than if you were voting in person using the machine and the ballot, because a lot of times those voting by mail forms have to be done properly. Otherwise, you may get called back later to sort of verify any information that might be on it. It's a little bit in the weeds there, but it's just the whole point is when you're voting by mail is to really pay attention to those instructions. So those were the things that I wanted to make sure we got mentioned there. And I think we're probably at the point where we could take some questions. I think if people have them, or if they're in the Q&A, if I'm not mistaken, I think Melissa was going to
Yes.
give those to us. Okay.
So we've gotten some questions in, not so much today, but we've gotten some questions in as we were leading up to this. And one of them is, how do I get assistance at my polling place? Can my spouse or my child help me?
The answer is yes. In Virginia, you're allowed to request assistance from either an election official, like a precinct chief, or a family member. We do require you to fill out a piece of paper. Essentially, it's a formal request for assistance, and the person providing the assistance accepting it. I believe that the person has to be familiar with you. If it's an election official, we do everything. We're required not to do anything to influence your vote. I don't want to see you writing down or filling out the box. I don't want to tell you who's better or who's worse. I'm just there to help facilitate the action of voting. But so yes, you can ask for help.
And I would just add, Neil, that there in some states a union official or your employer are not allowed to assist you. So there's a few limitations there, but by and large, if you have a spouse or some caregiver, et cetera, they're able to help you out.
Great. Another thing that came up was, what do I do if my name is not on the list of registered voters when I show up at my polling place?
Brian, do you want to go with that?
Oh,
Or no?
sure. From my experience, when there may be a couple of reasons for that. Let's assume maybe you moved, so your precinct / polling place has changed, but you have traditionally gone to the same school. And what would usually happen is you could be directed to the correct polling place if there's enough time, and you are able to travel there and cast your ballot in the correct location. Otherwise, you would be asked to fill out a provisional ballot because there may not be the correct candidates as you get further and further down into the geographic local area. Those precincts may have a different candidate, say for a Board of Education or the City Council, something along those lines. But you would be required to fill out a provisional ballot, and then it would be submitted and verified later when all the other votes are also counted.
I can speak for Virginia. I know that we have electronic poll books that look like iPads, and they are defaulted for the precinct in which you showed up in and I'm working at. But we do have the ability to do a citywide search to make sure that if you are registered to vote in the city, we can identify where you're registered to vote and where you should go to vote. There's also, we get trained on moving conditions. So if you moved within the past 12 months, it may mean one thing or the other, but if you moved 2 years ago, different conditions could apply. In the end, provisional voting is probably, and same day registration may be required so that your current specific information is available.
And along the same lines, we got a question about, can't you check to see if you're registered to vote ahead of time? And Neil, I believe the answer to that, Neil or Brian, is that yes, there are sites where you can check to see if you're registered ahead of time, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then
You'll be able to call your local registrar's office and verify as well.
okay, great. And then someone else mentioned that how would they find out accurate information about issues that are coming up, election issues that are coming up that impact the hearing loss community?
That's probably a localized issue. You should probably ask your do your research on your candidates. Excuse me, I'm losing my voice here. See where they stand on the issues. We do have some bills and stuff on our website that we support. You can ask your federal candidates whether they support those bills as well. At the local level, maybe it's noise ordinances, restaurant noises, stuff like that. Brian?
Yeah, I would just add, I think most of you know that our HLAA website is, if you will, under construction, under revision. You could go to our Know Your Rights not slash, but just it's either Know Your Rights or advocacy section there, and you can find some information about some issues there as well. And we hope to have that website, if you will, relaunched sometime later this year.
Okay, great. We also got a question about, is there a reason you aren't stressing providing portable hearing loops or other assisted listening devices at the polling places?
No, we've don't use them. I don't think there's nothing to broadcast sound wise. other than the entrance into the voting place. Brian?
Yeah, I think, I hope I understand the question as fully as possible here. If one has I'll call it a Roger pen, because I'm not familiar with all of the technology. And then if you have the other, the personnel at the polling place with say a neck loop, there might, if that's what you're sort of looking for in order to try to have some communication, you could certainly attempt to have that. You might want to contact the local Board of Elections ahead of time to see what they have available or could provide. I would, this is a bit of an assumption, but I would say that frankly, sort of the pen and paper would be the best mechanism, given the short duration of the communication that has to occur. And then obviously, if you have a speech to text app, that would be another mechanism to use.
Okay. Great. We also got a question of, do you have to provide proof of citizenship to vote?
Each state has its own set of requirements, one of which, yes, you have to be a citizen and you have to have the proper identification to prove that. But that varies from state to state. Brian?
No, that's absolutely correct. You've got to be a citizen in order to be eligible to then be registered to vote. You know, that requirement must be met at the registration point in the process.
And when a voter comes into the polls, we're just verifying that the information that they provided and stated matches what's in the poll book. So if you're not a registered voter, you would be directed down the provisional ballot path. And upon examining that ballot, if they determine you are not a citizen, that provisional ballot would not be counted.
We've also got a question of, do you have to check ahead of time for hard of hearing deaf accessibility? Suppose you arrive and there's nothing in place.
Yes. Voting places are in a variety of settings. Typically here in Alexandria, it's a school gym or a school rec center or a church. And those have various equipment inside. So yes, I would request it ahead of time or see if it's available. It may not be.
Again, I don't want to sound like I'm splitting hairs, but I think what Neil's pointing out is that the physical location is not per se something that's under the control of the local Board of Elections. However, the Board of Elections is required to meet the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act regulations, and one of those is to ensure that you have effective communications and provide the auxiliary aids and services in order to accomplish that effective communications. So there's your sort of legal theory, if you will, okay? But let's get down to the practical here. You're best to contact the local Board of Elections ahead of time. Tell them what your needs are and find out how they can be delivered to your specific polling place.
Great. We got another question. If I'm asking an election worker to help me with my, to help me as I'm voting, are my choices still kept confidential?
Yes, they should be. We strive to do that in Virginia. We're not here to influence you or look at your ballot. we try to do everything to ensure privacy. We have folders that hold ballots so that if it's curbside voting, we don't see what the ballot is when it's put into the machine or how you fill it out. If you're a new voter or recently naturalized American citizen, and this is your first time voting and you don't understand the process, we could talk you through the process. But when it comes down to who do I vote for, or is this the person, is this the guy who was on TV? We can't get into that. And that's part of the research that you need to do beforehand. And but yes, we try to keep everything as private as possible.
Okay, great.
And in fact, we often have people who in Virginia, in Alexandria, you fill in a box. And we've had people who filled in the wrong box for the wrong candidate, and they, oh my gosh, can I get another ballot? So what we ask them to do is fill in every box on the ballot. So we don't know who you did or didn't intend to vote for. We have you write spoiled on that ballot, so nobody can reuse that ballot. It gets put in a folder and counted and sent into the Board of Elections later, and then we issue a new ballot.
Okay. We also have questions about mail-in voting, and is that, can you explain that process a little bit more? Is that secure? Is that something that people should consider using? We've gotten several questions about that.
I feel it's secure. You just need to follow your state guidelines. If you need to request a ballot by a certain date and you need to return it by a certain date, I would try to beat those deadlines. I wouldn't wait until the last day. And as Brian said earlier, sometimes the requirements for mail-in balloting are sometimes more rigorous. You have to sign it on the inside, you have to sign it on the outside, you have to seal it. The signatures have to match. So make sure you comply with all that, and it should be okay. Brian, do you have anything else?
I would just generally say that, security and confidentiality and verification are sort of the three, watchwords of the whole process, no matter what, be it in person or by mail. But again, because you have to request the ballot, there's some verification there. Then you get the ballot. You've got to really follow those instructions, take your time with it. Call, or frankly, if you want to, I think I did this once myself, was I went down with my ballot to the county registrar's office just to make sure I had it correctly filled out, not so much who I voted for, but just who I am and where the signature is and that sort of thing. And then obviously hand it to them because it's delivered. And actually, I don't believe they would take it. They said, you got to go outside and put it in that drop box. I'm just saying all that because you got to read the instructions and follow those steps and watch your deadlines too, more so with that process. But other than that, it's secure and confidential.
Okay.
I would add to that I know in Virginia that if you did request a mail-in ballot, you're not obligated to use that ballot. You could bring it to the precinct on the day of the election. We will have you spoil it. We will then put that in a folder that gets counted and sent downtown later, and then you can vote on the machine with everybody else.
Okay, but you're saying that at least in Virginia, if you've requested a mail-in ballot and you've received it, you need to bring it in order to vote in person?
To vote in person, correct. If you've missed the deadline to mail it in, or you wanted to vote on the machine because you don't trust the mailing process, you could bring it into the precinct. We will officially and publicly dispose of that mail-in ballot and then let you vote on the machine.
Now, what would happen if you requested a mail-in ballot but didn't get it? First, I didn't get it and potentially vote provisionally or something?
On our computer screens in Virginia, it would indicate that you requested and received a mail-in ballot, but that the as of the day before the election, the Board of Election had not received it. And we can put a code in that acknowledges that and then let you vote on the machine that day. If you meet all the other normal voter registration, you're in the right precinct requirements.
Okay. Are voter video guides required to be captioned?
I looked this one up, Ron. You know, there are private groups that produce these. I would assume that they are required to, but there's probably no enforcement mechanism. Brian?
Yeah, I guess the answer and is a little bit of it depends. I would say generally that the Federal Communications Commission probably does not have any direct jurisdiction over the, if you will, producer of the content. If these videos are not being broadcasted or streamed over, well, I take back the streaming part, just broadcasted or over a commercial cable type channel. But you know, most of the, well, I shouldn't say most, but some of the voter guides are captioned. But when you get down to the detail of these, and I've only read the printed voter guides, obviously, they're not captioned, but that's really where you want to get the detailed information about where a candidate stands on a number of different issues. So I would think, though, that in the spirit of the Americans with Disabilities Act, the producers of these guides should make every attempt to put captioning in there. And a lot of these are on YouTube, and that's the dilemma that the FCC is in the middle of its regulatory process of trying to make some changes there where they would be required to be captioned, but it's not a requirement per se at this point in time.
Okay, I don't think we have any open questions. If anyone has any questions, if you want to go ahead and put them in the Q&A box, we can answer them. So we'll give folks just a couple minutes here to see if anyone wants to type anything in. And if not, then I think we are going to probably be done unless there's anything, Brian or Neil, that you want to touch on before we go.
Do your research locally, at least on the mechanics of the election. Where, when, how. Make sure you're registered to vote. And then, you know, to what extent you do research on the candidates is up on you. I know in Virginia, here's a question that probably wasn't asked. You are allowed to take your phone into the election booth. You are allowed to take a selfie with the ballot if you want. You're not allowed to have ongoing conversations, but if you want to do your research on your phone in the booth, that's fine. Just as long as you submit that before we close.
Thank you all for providing this information. As always, we will have this, this was recorded and we will have it up on our website. It will be going up on the new website, so which should be launching very soon. But so look for it there, and I will be sending out the presentation with all the links to everyone who participated today, in case you want to check out any of the links that were on the PowerPoint. We will be sending that out to everyone who joined us today for the call. It will also be when we put the recording up on the website. The presentation will also be included as well, so people can check that out there. You know, thank you for participating today and being a part of this, and we look forward to seeing you at other webinars. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.